What if the reason you still haven't won has nothing to do with bad luck, nothing to do with opportunity, and nothing to do with other people, but everything to do with where your energy goes every single day? Look at your life honestly. Your attention is scattered, your emotions are reactive, your focus is inconsistent. And yet, you expect progress. You want peace, but you chase validation. You want strength, but you feed distraction. You want control, but you surrender your attention to everything around you. And that contradiction is costing you everything. The Stoics saw this clearly, long before social media, long before modern chaos. They understood something most people still don't. Your life is not destroyed first by events. It is destroyed by mismanaged attention. What you focus on becomes your reality. What you repeat becomes your identity. What you tolerate becomes your life. So if your attention is weak, your life becomes weak. Marcus Aurelius knew this. In the middle of war, betrayal, pressure, he wrote something that still applies today. You have power over your mind, not outside events. That is not motivation, that is a warning. Because the moment you stop controlling your mind, something else will. And in today's world, everything is trying to. Notifications, opinions, comparison, endless noise. Every distraction asks one question: can I have your attention? And most people say yes, without thinking, without resistance, without awareness, and slowly they lose themselves. Attention is not just focus, it is power. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Lose your attention, you lose direction. Lose direction, you lose control. So if you want to win, you don't start outside, you start within. Because winning is not an event, it is a state. And that state is built through habits, not dramatic ones, not complicated ones, simple, relentless, daily. Today, you'll learn 8 Stoic habits that actually work, not theory, not motivation, systems. Habits that will harden your mind, sharpen your focus, rebuild your discipline, and most importantly, turn winning into a consequence, not a wish. But understand this before we begin. This is not easy. This is not comfortable. Because comfort creates dependency. Dependency destroys resilience. And resilience is the foundation of power. If you are ready, let's begin. Habit 1. Master the circle of control. There is one mistake that keeps most people weak. They try to control what was never theirs. Epictetus said it clearly: some things are in our control and some things are not. Simple, but devastating. Because once you understand this, you realize how much energy you've been wasting. You replay conversations, you obsess over opinions, you chase outcomes you cannot guarantee, you fight battles that were never yours. And every time you do this, you lose power, because energy spent outside your control never returns. So the Stoics drew a line, a hard line. Inside the line, your thoughts, your actions, your effort, your discipline. Outside the line, opinions, outcomes, recognition, other people. Power begins the moment you respect that line. Control what is yours. Release what is not, because whatever you try to control outside your domain will end up controlling you. Most people live emotionally dependent lives. They feel good only if things go their way. That is not strength, that is slavery. So here's how you apply this. Every morning, ask one question: what is actually mine to control today? Not your future, not your results. Today, then focus only on that. When stress hits, separate fact from fiction. What happened? What part is mine? What part is not? Then act immediately. Do not sit in analysis. Do not sit in emotion. Act. Because clarity without action is useless. Most people keep reaching outward, begging the world to become manageable. You do something different, you become unshakable within it. And that changes everything. But once you reclaim control, a new problem appears. You still don't act, which brings us to the next habit. Habit 2. Act before your feelings agree. Here is one of the most dangerous lies in modern life. I'll start when I feel ready. No, you won't, because readiness is an illusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you rise unwillingly, remember you are rising to do the work of a human being." Even an emperor felt resistance. Even he didn't feel like starting, but he moved anyway. That is the difference. Most people wait for motivation. The Stoics train discipline. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation fluctuates. Discipline remains. If your life depends on how you feel, your life will always be unstable, because feelings change constantly. So what do you do instead? You act first, then let feeling follow. Because action creates momentum. Momentum creates motivation, not the other way around. This is backed by psychology. Your brain adapts through behavior, not intention. So every time you act, despite resistance, you rewire yourself. You become someone who follows through. And that identity is everything. But if you don't, you build the opposite identity. Someone who delays, someone who negotiates, someone who avoids discomfort. And that identity destroys your potential. So here's the system. Wake up and don't ask how you feel. Ask what must be done. Then move. Immediately. No negotiation, no delay, no discussion. Because the moment you hesitate, your mind starts bargaining. And once bargaining begins, discipline ends. So remove the option. Act before the mind resists. Most people are soft in private and wonder why life is hard in public. You reverse that. You become disciplined in private, so life becomes manageable in public. That is power. But even if you act, even if you move, there is still something that can destroy you. Fear. And most people don't even realize how much it controls them. Habit 3. Stop suffering in advance. Seneca said something brutally honest. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Read that again, because this is where most people lose everything. Nothing has happened yet, but you're already exhausted. The conversation hasn't happened, but you've already lost in your mind. The failure isn't real, but you've already felt it. This is not reality. This is imagination. And imagination, when undisciplined, becomes a weapon against you. You create fear. You amplify it. You live inside it before anything even happens. That is how focus is destroyed. Before the work even begins, fear creates hesitation. Hesitation creates delay. Delay destroys momentum. And once momentum is gone, everything feels heavy. So the Stoics did something powerful. They confronted fear directly, not by avoiding it, by defining it. So here's what you do. When fear appears, write it down. Clearly, what exactly am I afraid of? Then ask, what evidence exists right now? Not what could happen. What is real? Then ask, if this happens, what will I do? Create a response. Because fear thrives in uncertainty, but it weakens in clarity. The moment you define your response, you remove helplessness. And when helplessness disappears, fear loses power. Most people let fear become atmosphere. You don't. You confront it, reduce it, move through it. Because action destroys imagined fear. The longer you wait, the stronger it becomes. The sooner you act, the weaker it gets. Cowardice grows in thought. Strength grows in action. And once you stop suffering in advance, you reclaim something powerful: energy. But even with energy, even with discipline, there is still one problem left: noise. The world, people, distractions, endless input. And if you cannot step away from it, you will never hear yourself think. That is where the next habit begins. there is something most people underestimate. It's not lack of intelligence, it's not lack of opportunity, it's influence. Your environment is shaping you every single day, silently, constantly, relentlessly. The people you listen to, the content you consume, the conversations you tolerate, all of it leaves a mark. And if you don't control what enters your mind, you will become a product of it. That is not opinion. That is reality. Marcus Aurelius warned himself constantly, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Think about that. Whatever you expose your mind to, you become. If you consume distraction, you become distracted. If you consume negativity, you become negative. If you consume weakness, you become weak. This is why most people struggle, not because they lack discipline, but because they are surrounded by noise, endless scrolling, pointless conversations, unnecessary input. And slowly, their mind becomes cluttered. Clutter destroys clarity. Clarity destroys confusion. And without clarity, you cannot focus. Habit 4. Control what enters your mind. Your mind is not a trash bin. It is a filter. But most people don't use it that way. They let everything in. Every opinion, every distraction, every meaningless piece of information. And then they wonder, why can't I think clearly? Because your mind is overloaded. You cannot build a strong mind with weak input, so you must become selective, not casually, aggressively. Start with this. Audit your inputs. What do you watch daily? What do you listen to? Who do you listen to? Who do you spend time with? Be honest, because whatever dominates your attention dominates your thinking, and whatever dominates your thinking controls your life. This is why strong individuals protect their mental space. They don't consume everything. They choose carefully. They eliminate noise. They reduce distraction. They prioritize clarity. And this creates something rare: mental silence, not emptiness, control. Because silence is where thinking happens, and thinking is where direction is built. Most people are so overwhelmed with input, they never develop original thought. They repeat, react, follow. You do something different. You filter. If something does not serve your growth, remove it. Not emotionally, strategically, because not everything deserves your attention. And the moment you understand that, your mind becomes sharper. But even if you control your input, there is still something that can weaken you. People. Habit 5. Reduce exposure to the wrong people. Here is a truth most people avoid. Not everyone around you wants you to grow. Not directly, not intentionally, but psychologically, your growth disrupts their comfort. Because when you improve, you become a reflection of what they are not doing. And that creates tension. So what happens? They question you, they doubt you, they subtly pull you back. Not aggressively, but consistently. Why are you changing? That's too much. You're overdoing it. And if you're not careful, you'll listen. Not because they're right, but because they're familiar. Familiarity feels safe, but it keeps you stuck. This is why environment matters. You cannot build a disciplined life in a distracted circle. You cannot grow while surrounded by stagnation. So you must make a decision, not emotional, strategic. Who deserves access to you? Because access is influence, and influence shapes identity. The people around you either sharpen you or soften you. There is no neutral. So choose carefully. Limit exposure to negativity. Limit exposure to distraction. Limit exposure to people who drain your focus, not out of arrogance, out of discipline. Because protecting your energy is protecting your future. And once you do this, something powerful happens. You begin to think clearly. But even then, there is another trap waiting: comparison. Habit 6. Stop measuring your life against others. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to destroy focus, because it shifts your attention away from your path and onto someone else's. And the moment you do that, you lose direction. You start questioning your progress. You start doubting your pace. You start chasing things that were never meant for you. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others." Think about that. Every minute spent comparing is a minute stolen from your own growth. And the worst part? Comparison is never accurate. You see their highlight, not their struggle. You see their result, not their process. So you compare your reality to their illusion. And then you feel behind. That feeling is false. Because your path is yours. Different timing, different challenges, different direction. So why measure it against someone else? It makes no sense. Yet most people do it daily, scrolling, comparing, doubting, and slowly they lose confidence because comparison creates insecurity, and insecurity destroys focus. So here's the rule. Focus on your path, not occasionally, exclusively. Track your progress, not theirs. Improve your habits, not your image, because growth is internal, not external. The moment you stop comparing, you regain clarity. The moment you regain clarity, you regain direction. And direction is everything. There is a version of you that does not care about others' timelines, that does not chase validation, that does not get distracted by noise. That version is focused, stable, unshakable, and it exists the moment you stop looking outward. But even then, one final challenge remains: execution. Because knowing is not enough. Understanding is not enough. You can have perfect clarity and still do nothing. And that is where most people fail. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't do it consistently. That is where the final part begins, where knowledge becomes action, where discipline becomes identity, where your life actually changes. Most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they don't do it consistently. They learn, they understand, they feel inspired, and then they stop, not because they can't continue, but because they don't. And that difference changes everything. Because knowledge without execution is self-deception. You can understand Stoicism perfectly and still live a distracted life. You can know what discipline looks like and still avoid it daily. That is the trap. You don't need more information. You need transformation. And transformation only happens through repetition, daily, relentless, uncomfortable repetition. Habit 7. Build a system, not dependence on motivation. Here is the truth most people don't want to hear. Motivation is unreliable. It feels strong one day, gone the next. If your discipline depends on how you feel, you will always be inconsistent. Because feelings change. Constantly, the Stoics knew this. They didn't rely on emotion, they relied on structure. Systems. A system does not ask how you feel. It tells you what to do. Wake up at the same time, work at the same time, train at the same time, reflect at the same time, not perfectly, consistently. Because consistency creates identity. You don't become disciplined once. You become disciplined daily. Small actions repeated until they become automatic, until you no longer ask, "Do I feel like it?" Because the answer no longer matters. This is what separates strong individuals from everyone else. They don't negotiate with themselves. The moment you start negotiating, you start losing. "I'll do it later. I'll skip today. I'll start tomorrow." These are not harmless thoughts, they are patterns, and patterns become identity. So replace the pattern. No negotiation, no delay, no emotional decision-making, just execution, because discipline is not about intensity, it's about consistency, and consistency builds power. Habit 8. Finish what you start. There is one habit that silently destroys confidence. Starting everything, finishing nothing. Think about it. How many things have you begun and abandoned? Plans, goals, routines. Each time you quit, something happens. you weaken your self-trust. Because your mind learns, I don't follow through, and once that belief is installed, everything becomes harder. Focus drops. Confidence disappears. Discipline collapses. Not because you're incapable, but because you trained inconsistency. So here's the rule. If you start, you finish, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but completely, because finishing builds identity. Each completed action tells your mind, I execute. And that belief changes everything. Confidence grows, focus sharpens, direction becomes clear. So stop chasing new beginnings. Master completion. Before you end your day, define tomorrow's first action. Make it clear, simple, immediate. So when the moment comes, you don't think, you act. Because thinking creates hesitation, action creates momentum, and momentum builds unstoppable discipline. At the end of everything, there is one truth that remains. Your life follows your attention, not your intentions, not your plans, your attention. Where you place it determines what grows. If you give it to distraction, your life becomes scattered. If you give it to comfort, your life becomes weak. If you give it to discipline, your life becomes powerful. This is the law, simple, unforgiving. So look at your life honestly. Where is your attention going? Because that answer is your future. The Stoics did not try to control the world, they controlled themselves. And through that, they became unshakable. You can do the same, not through motivation, not through luck, through discipline, daily decisions repeated consistently, until focus becomes your default, until discipline becomes your identity, until distraction no longer controls you. There is a version of you that is calm under pressure, focused under chaos, unmoved by distraction. That version is not far away. It is built through what you do today, and tomorrow, and every day after that. So stop waiting, stop delaying, stop negotiating, start building right now, because time is moving whether you act or not. And one day you will either look back with pride or regret. The difference is what you do next. If this changed the way you think, don't ignore it. Take one action today, just one, that moves your life forward, and commit to it quietly. Because real transformation does not need to be announced, it needs to be executed. If you're ready to rebuild your discipline, subscribe, because this is not motivation. This is training. Become the master of your mind. Rebuild, refocus, rise.